Howdy, it's Matt, and in this episode I've got 15 topics and tips and hints for when it comes to iNav in 2020. So what are these hints and tips? Number one, twice as fast GPS, more satellites, DFU mode, absolutely fantastic. If you don't know what that is, you're going to love it in a few moments. Transmitter trims, heck, why don't I just put this on the screen and you can read it as well. We also, one model setup in your transmitter as well, so you can save spaces in your transmitter. Stick commands and buzzers. Copy and pasting the OSD setup as well. Gonna save you a load of time mucking around with that. Trim alignment at the field. Acro, and it really does mean acrobatic. Turn assist and turning it off. For the models which you have with rudders, 2 launch mode settings which you need to be aware of. A big warning when it comes from the migration from 2.4 to 2.5, and the one, and I mean the only one reason why you would want to upgrade to 2.5. And a little note on upcoming episodes. So that's what we're going to be covering in this episode. Now, before we will go any further, I want to do a massive hat tip to Sir Andrew Newton for a whole load of tips and tricks and other bits and bobs, which some of them we'll be talking about here in this episode. I will put a link to this and everything else which we discussed down in the video description underneath this video on YouTube. So just click like show more, the little down arrow if you're on your mobile phone, and links and all the settings which I've discussed will be there for you to copy and paste. So the first thing first is that what I actually have on my desk, and by the way, it's twice as fast GPS. I have the 1.4 meter Eagle, and you may notice the little flight controller blinking in there. So I've got a little F4 board in there already set up. And if you want a twice as fast GPS connection, it is simple as one drop down option. So let's just go to our GPS and see what we're talking about. And you'll see that the update time here is set to 10 Hertz, or it's flicking up and down 10 Hertz. However, by default, when you go into configuration and you choose u-blocks, and it will be set to u-blocks by default. So let's go and do save and reboot. So, and while it's doing that, and by the way, iNavs has not changed. There is a million save and reboots. Every time you change one setting, you have to save and reboot. Minor annoyance, which is still there. Anyway. So you'll now see that we're set to u-blocks. If we now go down to GPS, you'll see the update time is 5 Hertz. So 5 Hertz is once per second, okay, an event once per second. And that's at 5 Hertz. So if you want your GPS to run as twice as fast, and obviously if your GPS supports it. So let's say that we don't know if your GPS puck supports this or not. Change it to u-block 7. Go down and hit save and reboot. You have to excuse me, there's a great big tail here sat in the way, so I'm having to look over there. So wait for that to reboot, and then when this loads back up, come on, beautiful, thank you. We're now going to the GPS, and 10 Hertz, twice as fast GPS. Happy days, who's going to argue with that for one setting? Now, you will know whether your GPS is working or not. And again, you'll notice that I'm not getting a fix here. I'm somewhere on the square planet Earth, or rectangular planet Earth. However, you'll see total messages and you'll see the number increasing, and that's thumbs up. That proves to you that the GPS is working and iNav is able to communicate with it. So you may set yours to u-block 7. You may say 10 Hertz there, but you might not see any messages, and that will tell you that it's not supported. Right, the other one is something which you need to be aware of for those of you which are in Europe. So let's go back to configuration. Is that this one everybody just kind of overlooks. So you may just leave that on auto detect. However, do choose your right set. So if you're in Europe, choose European. If you're in America, choose North American. Okay, so because I'm based here in the UK, I've specifically set mine to European, e.g. and NOS ground assistance type. Now there is one other setting, so we're getting into the next one. So and again, I will put all the settings which we're discussing down in the video description for you. So the next one is that I didn't see a setting for this in the interface, and it's set GPS u-blocks use Galileo equals on. So if I remember correctly, Galilean is a set of 20 or so satellites which are in orbit, which they may or may not add to later. However, by just enabling that setting and then going, so set GPS u-blocks, use Galileo equals on, and then crucially type in save and hit return, is that will give you extra satellites. We're not going to complain about extra satellites to help our models get a decent GPS lock. So in those free settings, uBlock 7, we made it twice as fast. We made sure that we were in the right, instead of just relying on auto detect, we're always going to stay in North America, aren't we? We're always going to stay in Europe, so set it to be that. Don't let the board trying to work it out for itself. You can save it some time by setting that, and of course you can get some extra satellites. Now the next setting is absolutely fantastic for those of you looking to flash your board, whether you're looking to upgrade, but obviously you would take a differences file first. Oh, if you don't know what differences is, what you can do is that you can come into the CLI tab, type in diff and then hit enter, and then all those settings there are all the settings which are customized to your iNav install. Okay, now there is a caveat to that. If you're using 2.4 and you migrate into 2.5, I will cover that later on in this episode for you. However, what you can do is either highlight and copy and paste all those to a baby notepad, or you can save that to a local file and then of course load it afterwards. So after you've been and done a clean upgrade, you can then apply all your settings back again. However, if I bring myself back onto the topic, if you type in DFU and then were to hit enter, that puts the board into the flashing mode. So instead of trying to push down the boot button or trying to short the pins on the board, what you can do is just come here, go to the CLI tab, and it doesn't matter if the board's got Betaflight loaded on it or something like that. Go into the CLI, type in DFU, hit return, and then you can go into the firmware flasher, and it just makes things so much more civilized, to be honest. Right, moving on to the next one is, and I picked this up from Sir Andrew Newton's blog, which is transmitter trims. Now, Powell basically says that you should not use trims with iNav, and I agree with that, although you have the auto trim mode. However, one thing which is perhaps a little bit disappointing to still see is that now 3 years, and it is 3 years on since I did the original iNav series, is that the Vector in many ways is much nicer to use compared to iNav, and we're comparing a paid product to a free product, but even the Vector, which is now years and years old, is still knocking spots off iNav in certain departments, and this is one of them. So let me explain here is that what you would do with an Eagle Tree Vector if you had one in your model is that you would get all your surfaces working as normal, do your pre-flight checks, throw the model into the sky, then get it trimmed in, land, then go into the OSD menu and then incorporate the trims, and that's it. That's all you need to do, and that means that the model will fly straight and come back home, etc, etc. A very civilized experience. However, with iNav, it's not as civilized, and I've got a couple of tips for you. So let me put these on the screen so that you can see them. So while Powell basically says don't use trims, actually I'm going to say to use trims, but to get back to using no trims afterwards. This will make more sense now when I explain. So you've got a brand new model, so maybe I've got my Eagle here, which I go, when it stops raining, I'll go out and fly. What will happen, and my process is this, and I genuinely hope that you find this useful, is that what I'll do is go off, launch the model, and then I will use the trims on the transmitter here to trim the model in to fly straight. So just like I would do with an Eagle Tree Vector, or you would do with an Eagle Tree Vector. Then I would land. However, because iNav doesn't have that simple option to incorporate trims, is that what we then need to do is you need 4, depending on how many surfaces you've got on your model. Obviously it's a flying wing, you just need 2 pins. And what you then do is leave your transmitter on and leave your model on, go around and stick pins into the surfaces so the surfaces are held in the attitude of what they are right now. So for example's sake, maybe you'll see that surface there is slightly up. I would put a pin in there just to hold that surface still. Then you get your clevis, so I'm using the adjustable clevises on each of the control horns. So go around with a screwdriver and then undo each of those 4 screws. So I've got 4 surfaces on the model, so if it was a flying wing you'd do 2. Go around, undo those. Then I would turn let me get this right. So I would then loosen all the crevices on there, then put all my trims back to normal, back to the center on here, and then that then means that all your servos have come back to their home positions, and because you've got the pins in the surfaces, did I screw up there? Let me just get this right. Use the trims, land, pin the surfaces to hold them still, then loosen the crevices, and of course what you then do, and what you then have to do, put the trims back in, to put all your trims back to normal, so all the servos reset themselves, and then go round and do up all the little screws on your crevices. Just be aware of, imagine you've got the hole with the rod which is going through it. It's going to look like it, you know what it's going to look like, but you can imagine there's some slop in the control surface. Just be aware is that if the control surface is pushing down, make sure that you have pushed the push rod up against the outer edge, so it's taking up any slop. That's a minor little tip which will help during the trimmer mechanism. Anyway, go around, do all the surfaces back up. You've got your transmitter back to no trims, chuck the model in the sky again, just make sure it's right. Obviously, if you do need to add some extra trim, put some more trim back in your transmitter, land again, and then just repeat the process. It will be infinitely less changes. It will be really minor changes which you put in the second time around, and normally within 2 throws or 2 flights, you've got everything trimmed into the model, and then you've got your trims back here to 0. So that was something which I picked up here from Andrew's blog. The next one, and again, Andrew picked this up from UAV Futures, is that you only need 1 model in your transmitter for iNav, and that's absolutely correct, because remember, you're not using trims, so that means that you can set up all your switches exactly the same for every single model, because you're using exactly the same layout. And actually, I used the same stick and switch layout for both iNav and also Betaflight, because I do fly a quad around here as well. So it just makes it all instinctive, and that's what you want in a moment of panic when you need to hit return to home, which thankfully, touch wood, I've only ever had twice, is that you know that you bring both switches in the top right hand corners back, and the model comes home. You basically telling the model to come home. So that will save you model memory as well, and also just make things easier and faster to set up. Now, the next one is that Andrew does talk about this, and like I said, I'll include a link to this in the video description, but the one thing which I want to pick up here is, and I'm going to skip the PID tuning. What I am going to pick up with you is that there are stick commands available to you in iNav. Now, I kind of knew that these existed, and over the weekend I actually had a quick look in the OSD menu, and it's got promise. It's not as comprehensive as the Vector. Remember, I was saying earlier, maybe in some ways I was a little disappointed on some of the still glaring differences between the two systems. One is very, very polished, but it's showing promise, and I don't mean to detract from that. I think that's clear. But anyway, get into the OSD menu, literally to bring your throttle stick up over to the left, and then go to, I think it was straight up, let me get that right, yeah, over to the left like that, and then you get into the, obviously with your model not armed, is then you get into the on-screen menu, and then you can go around and change your PIDs. You can also change a collection of other settings as well from the flight line without a computer, and it does make things an awful lot more civilized. However, the one tip which you need to know is that you really should fit a buzzer to your flight controller board, and the reason why you want to fit a buzzer to your flight controller board is that recently, and I'll get to this a little bit later, is that I set up a mission, and iNav just did fantastically well, so double thumbs up there for that. Is that what I did find is that when you go to, you'll see on there, load waypoint mission, so that's down and then to the top right. Now, there is no notification on the OSD, and of course, because the board's inside of the model, you can't see the lights. So what do you need to know that it's actually worked? You need the beep from a buzzer, and of course, I didn't have that on my model the other day, so that's my job to do later. I need to get in there and solder in a buzzer, so that I then know that when I do that to the top right hand corner, is that it has been and correctly loaded the waypoint mission, because there is just no other indication that it has been and loaded. Also, we will get to this in a moment, is that in fact, no, let's skip to that right now. There's another Number 3, which was the Forget About Angle and Horizon modes by Powell. Actually, I'm going to disagree with him. I actually really like Horizon mode for just pottering around. And that is one thing which I will do with iNav, is that I will take the time to get the board really trimmed in. So if I go and click disconnect, is that Andrew does note in his blog that he does and has found that most models need 3 to say 5 degrees pitch. Is that if we go into configuration, you'll see that this one's actually set on 5.5, which is perhaps a little bit high for a starter one. I will, when the weather permits, actually get my model to fly straight and level in Horizon mode, and that genuinely does mean that I do need to tweak quite heavily around with pitch and roll. I do find the model, even though it's trimmed in manually, when we stick it into Horizon mode, because the board is slightly off or maybe on a slight little skew inside of the model itself, is that I will find the model will shift in the sky when there's no other, and you can only really do it on a low wind day. So I will tweak these settings to the ends of the earth, going in by about a 0.5 degree increment, just to get the models to fly straight with Horizon. So yeah, I understand what they're saying there with Forget About Angle and Horizon modes, but I use Horizon an awful lot, and I will spend the extra time to get it incorporated. Right, let's get ourselves back onto topic. Oh, this was another note from Andrew, which was that you may spend a whole load of time setting up your OSD exactly the way which you'd like it. So that's the way which I like mine set up. I know that I've got the RSSI and the satellites in the top left hand corner. I can see the latitude and longitude. I can see the other details on the screen. However, setting these things up manually each time is a complete pain in the rear. So instead, what you can do is that go down to CLI and then type in diff. So if I DIFF, hit return, and we'll scroll up here and you'll see this OSD layout. What you can do is just copy that and save it to a text file, and of course on your next board, just come in here, go into copy that text out. So we'll go copy like so, go into there, paste it in, hit return, and you'll see that it's setting all those options for us, and then you just type in save and hit return, and job's a good one. What you then end up with is your OSD exactly how you like it. And of course, if you've set up multiple OSDs, is that then it will set each of those up for you as well from the previous settings. So you only need, the point being, you only need to set up your OSD once, copy the settings, and jobs are good, and you can apply it to all of your iNav installs. And again, there's further details on the blog post in the video description for you. And the next one is the trim alignment for the board on the Flightline. Well, where was that in here for? So there's Andrew's notes on the OSD layout. So this is, and again, I didn't really know about this because I've not paid much attention to the stick menu, and also this highlights why you really want a beeper on there. So Andrew describes in here how you can change your board alignment using stick functions at the Flightline. So let's take a closer look at these. So what he's mentioning here is that you can trim the accelerometer left, so that's up, and then middle and left. So that will get the model to slide to go to the left, and it's going about 0.3 of a degree apparently. So maybe you want a couple of clicks to go across a degree. You can do it to the right, you can do forwards, and then you can do backwards as well. And of course, remember to save the settings, and that's the key, back out to the bottom right hand corners, so that the settings then get saved. And that's extremely useful. That does mean that potentially you don't need to take a laptop to the Flightline. Personally, I do quite like taking the laptop to the Flightline because I can change other things much more easily, maybe flight modes or something like that when I'm at the Flightline, or maybe change some more drastic settings in there. So I normally do take a laptop for a model which I'm getting trimmed in and getting set up with iNav. However, that trim the board alignment and using the stick functions is could be a massive time saver for you. The next one is, there's an interesting comment in here, which is from Andrew, is acro does really mean acrobatic. So this is kind of curious. What iNav tries to do, and actually does do, so you can imagine you've got a 3D model with iNav set up on it, is that normally what would happen with no other modes, so if just flying normally, manual mode, is that if you bank the model, so you apply aileron input, the model will bank and then it will turn around in the sky. However, in the field of aerobatics, you actually normally what you're looking for is a flat turn. So what you're looking for is the model to turn, but for its attitude to stay horizontal. So how the pilot would achieve this is by flying straight, applying ailerons, however putting rudder in there as well to counteract that, and then that's how the model flies around flat in the sky. And that's what iNav actually applies. Now, you need to be aware that that's how you can use iNav in acro mode to help you knife edge a model, something which I've got to be honest, I've not tried. I really must go out and try and see what it's like just for poops and puddles. However, that may also be something which is undesirable, which we will get to in, actually that's the next one on the list, and that's the last one which I've got here off Andrew's blog post, which is that the turn assist and overactive rudder causes tip stalls in return to home and position hold. Now, I will put a link to Andrew's video in the video description, or maybe in the top right-hand corner, where Andrew actually shows this, is that in iNav, it's trying to do that movement when you're banking left. And of course, that can cause the model to stall, and you'll see it acting very weirdly. Now, it's literally just one setting. So if you have a model with rudder, so I have a model here with rudder, and that's something which I want to turn off, you literally just copy and paste that setting. So it's fixed wing, turn assist, yaw gain, set it to 0, and that basically disables the iNav putting any form of rudder input in there. So stick that into your CLI tab and then hit save, and then that turns it off for your iNav install. Now, the next setting is actually two settings, and it's to do with launch control. So those of you which are aware, iNav does have an auto launch feature. However, there are two commands which you need to be aware of. The first one is, let's go and get this one. So I'll type get, and it's nav underscore fixed FW launched. I'll put a link to it in the video description. Okay. And this is, so why would you want to change this launch timeout? There are instances, and I can't explain my specific instance, but there are instances where you would want iNav to continue the launch of the model for longer. So what you've got here is nav launch timeout, so that would be 5 seconds. There are instances, and I need to change mine, so I'm going to do this right now. So I'm going to do set that value to 10,000, hit enter, and then hit, oh, I'm not going to hit save straight away. And what that will now do is that when you do an auto launch, the model will then climb for, instead of 5 seconds, for 10 seconds, okay? That does mean that maybe you need to set yourself in the seat for longer, or you've got something else you need to do post-launch. That affords you twice as much time, up to potentially a minute for so you could have the model just flying off for a minute in launch mode. I probably wouldn't suggest that one, but a greater time than 5 seconds would be quite useful, especially if you've got other things which you, like I said, maybe you need to sit down in your seat or something like that. So that will give you some extra time on the launch. The other one is the climb angle. So let's go and get the basic value for this. And like I said, all these settings are in the video description. So by default, the fixed wing launch, nav fixed wing launch climb angle is 18 degrees up. However, there are instances when you would want this higher and also lower. So what I would actually say to begin with is just try it out at 18 degrees and see how it works for you. However, you may have a flying site where you need to climb more aggressively, and you may want to change that to, say, 22 degrees. Now, I would strongly suggest that you do not go any further than 22 degrees, because you may then end up stalling your model. So have a play with that. So it depends upon your circumstances. Also, on the flip side, if you have an XUAV Mini Talon, that is a model which, if you stick too much up attitude in that launch, the model will go up and it will just stall and go splat. They are absolutely renowned for that. So with a Mini Talon, for example, when you do that auto launch with your model, you actually want it to fly a little bit less. So you may even want to turn that down to 15 degrees, dare I say even 14 degrees if you have a mini Talon, so the model is not climbing so aggressively and it can really get that airspeed up and then get going. But otherwise, it's such a horrible sight to see a mini Talon go splat, because you just need lots of airspeed underneath your model. So with that said, I've changed mine, so I'm just going to hit save down here in the CLI tab. Now, the next comment or next topic is to do with the change from iNav 2.4 to 2.5. So let me go and get the page up and we'll discuss this further. Outstanding. Now, I'll put a link to this in the video description, as I've mentioned many times before. The one thing which you need to be very, very careful, and it's the warning on the upgrade from iNav 2.4 to 2.5, is that your flight mode. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. If we go into the modes tab, you will see that I've got all my modes set up here, as I'm sure you have your modes set up in here as well. The thing is that in the change from iNav 2.4 to iNav 2.5, is that the allocation of the numbers which you have for these are different, and they are now going to, because it might have, in versions 2.4 and below, these numbers could have changed. In version 2.5 and beyond, they will be permanent numbers. So it's a pain in the rear right now if you change from 2.4 or earlier to 2.5, and you'll need to go through this extra step, which I'll explain in a moment. But just be aware is that your flight modes are quite likely to get screwed up if you literally just go into the CLI tab. So if I'll go to diff, for example, if you were to copy and paste your aux options here, that's what the flight modes are. So if you were to copy and paste those and then put them into 2.5, at best they wouldn't work, and at worst they would work, and they'd all be screwed up. So what you need to be aware of is that there is a tool called Box2Perm. So if you go follow the link, and then there's an online version here, and then you can paste in your diff file and then aux in there, and then convert to 2.5, and then it will go and convert those numbers for you, and you just copy and paste those back out, and then you can put them into your console, so like so, and then hit return and then type in save. And that's the one thing which you need to look out for, and the word of warning when it comes to version 2.4, the differences between 2.4 and 2.5. However, that brings us on really nicely to the one setting which you would be very interested in if you're a fixed wing pilot when it comes to iNav 2.5, which I cannot remember what it's called. So I'm just going to type in get, and I'm going to do nav, and then it was fixed wing, wasn't it? Oh wow, there's loads of settings in here. What we are looking for, and I may have to nip away and go and find it, is that, oh no, there it is, found it. Right, it is nav FW control smoothness. I'll put this into my notes over here so I don't forget it. I need to paste without formatting. Is nav FW control smoothness. Now this is a new setting for version 2.5, and let me explain what it was like before in 2.4 and now in 2.5. And this is to do with waypoint missions, and give you a heads up, I do have a little video coming out very shortly on how to set up and test and confirm your and to fly your first mission with iNav, because there is a lot of confusion around this in the community right now, and I thank goodness for all those very helpful people over it, especially Matt Cave. Thank you, sir, for everybody's help with that over in the iNav Facebook group. Now, what happens in 2.4 is that you're on a mission and you've set yourself out waypoints, so imaginary points in space where the model flies to and then goes on potentially onto another waypoint. Is that what happens right now is that you get to a waypoint and the model goes and really sharply goes off on a bender to the next point, which is fine if it's on a slight angle, but if you're literally going back on yourself, the model cranks itself right down. Talk about sharp inputs. It really does go ballistic. So actually, if you're using iNav 2.4 in missions, make sure you maybe put an extra little point in there, an extra waypoint in there, just to make sure it's not so much of a harsh turn, especially if you're doing a complete U-turn. However, when it comes to iNav 2.5, the one setting which I can see that it would give you a reason to upgrade is this setting, which is the control smoothness. Now you want to set this to around 7. That seems to work really well. So instead of the model going blank and going like breaking its neck to go and turn, instead it's much more smooth. And I wish I had some OSD footage for you for this. I might see if I can dig out some from a couple of nights back, just to at least show you the harsh turn which you do get in 2.4. In 2.5, it's so much nicer. It's just like a nice rounded turn off to the next flight point, to the next waypoint. So yeah, that's one setting which I would say is worth upgrading to 2.54. Right. That leaves us with 2 things left in the to-do list, and they were upcoming videos. There are 2 upcoming videos which I'll get out in the next couple of days-ish. The first one, like I've just mentioned, will be to do with waypoints. Waypoints are really cool. You can set them up in mission control. You then, I'm not going to, in fact, I'm going to stop myself there. Look out for the next video on missions because they do work in iNav and they work really well. I can tell you, sat back in that chair, enjoying that view. It was a 10 out of 10. Once I got it working and got past the frustrations, and that's the reason why I'm making that video, so you don't have to go through those frustrations. You can just follow the steps which I show you, and then you can go off on your first waypoint mission. Very cool. And the other one is iNav in as fast as possible. So unlike the previous series, which we broke the whole iNav install out, literally from choosing the boards to the soldering, to the settings and things like that, to getting it to the flight line. Instead, we're going to have a fast as possible install. So we literally just sit here with the configurator and we just go through all the settings as fast as possible so that you can go from 0 to hero as fast as possible. I hope that makes sense. So there we go. Like I mentioned previously, all settings, etc, which we've been discussed in this video, especially the links to the iNav website and also that BoxPerm tool as well to convert your auxiliary settings. Also Sir Andrew Newton's blog as well. Do go and have a read of that. Very worthwhile. Like I said, this is one of the reasons why we're making this video, because I found it so worthwhile. So there's a link to that and of course all the other settings down in the video description for you. So with that said, I sincerely hope that you found this video helpful. These are a collection of different things which I found new or have helped me with my iNav adventures, and I sincerely hope that they help you too. If you're new here, I'm Matt, welcome aboard. Don't forget to press the subscribe button, and of course don't forget to press the bell icon so that YouTube notifies you when the next video out, because it could be one of those 2 videos which I just mentioned a few moments ago, but specifically could be the missions. We could also be out on a mission with iNav, or maybe something else RC related. It may even be the maiden of this eagle once that rain out there has finally disappeared. So with that said, as always, from myself, Matt, thank you very much for taking the time to join me here for a cold cup of coffee, and I've got a little snack there on the left hand side for a chit chat and some useful tips when it comes to iNav. So as always, from myself, Matt, cheerios!